Recording in progress.
We're ready to begin.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Clerk. And with that, I'd like to call this meeting to order as the Policy and Services Committee for the City of Palo Alto for March the 12th, 2024. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll, please?
Chair Koo,
Here.
Councilmember Tanaka. Here. Councilmember Lipcott-Haynes. Here. We have a quorum, 3 present. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we'll go to public comments.
Chair, we have no request to speak.
Very good. Thank you so much. And with that, we'll go to our action items. Our first one is race and equity updates and potential direction on the collection and use of boards and commissions demographic data.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Koo and members of the Policy and Services Committee. I'll be making this presentation today with our Equity and Inclusion Program Manager, Mr. Kojo Pierce. If the clerk could pull up the presentation, please. Next slide. So typically for the race and equity updates, it actually just depends on what we're bringing as to whether we have a presentation for you. And this evening, there is at least one discussion item that we wanted to make sure that we spent a little bit of time with the committee on. So that's why you have the formal presentation instead of us just walking you through the update report, which we have done in the past. So this evening, we'll do that brief status update on the remaining council assignments. As you may recall, in 2020, the City Council gave 17 assignments for us in our race and equity journey, and we've accomplished 15 of 17. So I will give you an update on those remaining 2, which are partially complete. We'll also do an overview of the board and commission survey. The last time the city conducted a survey was in 2021, and there's another one currently out. And so we'll give you an overview of that current survey, as well as then the next discussion, which there's 2 questions that we have for this committee, thinking about how you want to share the board and commission survey results with the entire council and when, as well as thinking about how you would like to assess the socioeconomic status demographic for boards and commissions. And lastly, this report always includes a lot of information about what's going on at the libraries and the theater, the children's theater, and other community services department events and activities. So just briefly, we'll point to where that is in the report. There's a lot of good events happening at the city. So next slide, please. So as I referenced, of the 17 assignments that the City Council gave us in 2020, which included, this is all, attachment A summarizes the completed assignments for anyone who wanted to go back and look at the other 15. But it was everything ranging from adopting the equity mission statement all the way through thinking about how we report out on our use of force and the role of the independent police auditor, et cetera. So the 2 remaining assignments are listed here on the screen. One is assignment C, which is after the full implementation of the records management system and the first data collection period directs staff to resume annual data collection and analysis of police contact data similar to the previous stop data reports. As you recall, last year in 2023, the police department completed the first annual pool of information. So all of the stop data from 2022 were sent that over to the DOJ, and we had our first amount of data that had been verified by the DOJ, and that's what our RIPA, the Racial Identity Profiling Act, dashboard includes as the 2022 data, which became public in 2023. We are finalizing the 2023 data in the police department right now. We have Captain Reifschneider on if there are further questions about this, but that information will be updating the dashboard. That part of this is complete. The piece that is still pending within this item C is the analysis of the data. So the last time we came to you, we let you know that we were in process with the National Policing Institute to get an agreement in place so that they can help us with our data collection or the data analysis, particularly thinking of how we use this data. And since the last time we've spoken to this committee, we have officially signed that agreement with them and started the conversation so that we can map out our timeline this year with getting a report of some sort to this committee and the full council. So once that work is done, that's when this assignment will be completed, but we will keep the committee updated as we go through that item. So the next one is assignment L, which is direct staff in coordination with the city's overall diversity and inclusion efforts to conduct a workforce demographic assessment as baseline information and to pursue an employee assessment to measure city workforce culture. And we also deem this one as partially complete at this point, where we have contracted with Ivy Planning Group. It's a group based out on the East Coast, and they have conducted interviews and focus groups with staff, and they are rounding out their assessment work to be able to present that to the city council in the coming months. So we're really excited about the work that they've been doing with staff. I believe they had conversations with most of the city council members as well last year, and us having the ability to assess our workforce and things that we want to prioritize. So the next steps on assignment L is that we have once Ivy presents their actual assessment to us, and we'll prepare that to come to the city council. We also have put together an equity 2024 action plan, which is really what can we accomplish of the list of things provided, what can we accomplish in this year? And that action plan includes things that we also have not yet accomplished over these past few years, which includes completing our demographics information for staff and posting that online, as well as the CDAW, which is the Convention for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, making sure that we have an ordinance that we can present to the city council on that topic, which has been an assignment of ours as well. So our action plan, which we'll bring to council with the assessment, will include those items. I'm sure you'll have questions on this, so we can come back to this slide if you need to. Next slide, please. So then switching gears to the board and commission survey, as I referenced, the first survey that we conducted was in 2021. And we have a list of questions that we asked. It's intended to be an annual survey to assess the change over time. And we shared the results with the Policy and Services Committee, and we posted them online through an information report. We have not been able to do this annually, which is why we're so grateful that Mr. Pierce is here, because he'll be able to keep a lot of these assignments going in the years in between. So we currently right now have a survey going, and it's available to our board and commission members, existing board and commission members, to complete by this Friday. It was sent to all of the members, and we let them know that the survey is anonymous and will only report the information in the aggregate, which means we won't be reporting by commission. If a commission is only 5 or 7 people, it's very easy to identify individuals, and it's important for us that we maintain that anonymity as we've promised to our commission members. And lastly, of the survey itself, as overview, is we use a slightly different set of questions this time than we did last time. One of the changes relates to socioeconomic status. At our last committee meeting here, I referenced that in the 2021 survey, it was an open-ended question of tell us what your socioeconomic status is. And the responses were very wide-ranging, from some saying adequate, to some saying, I don't know, to some saying, why are you asking this question? So we took a slightly different approach this year in the survey that you'll see. It's attachment C in the report. And we asked about income. And there are a few questions about income because we wanted to be able to differentiate a retired person's income that previously had a larger salary from someone who is actively working right now and is low income. Have we mastered this question? Maybe not, but we wanted to share that with this committee and have further discussion on that particular question, because we want to make sure that we're capturing the information in a way that represents how the council would like it. Next slide, please. So we just gave you a screenshot of what the survey looks like. Our comms department helped us put it online, and it's very pretty. Next slide, please. Okay, so the discussion questions regarding the survey results. The two that we'd like to zoom in on for this committee this evening is one, how should the board and commission demographic survey response data be shared with the full city council for consideration when you're making new appointments? The staff recommendation on this one is that we provide the demographic data on the current composition of the boards and commissions and the corresponding contextual data about Palo Alto's demographics as reference material prior to you making the board and commission appointments. And we can discuss that further. And the second question that we have for this committee is how should we assess the board and commission member socioeconomic status? Our goal for demographic information is to actually put the demographic information questions on the application itself, which means it's, and Ms. Stump can speak to any questions you have around that, but essentially it becomes a public record and we want to make sure that what we are asking for is something that folks are comfortable with sharing. So that's kind of the piece of why we really want to make sure we're capturing the socioeconomic status question adequately, while also providing you information about if you have a variety of socioeconomic groups represented on your boards and commissions. Next slide. So here we just put between packet pages 8 and 10, there's information on all the awesome events that are going on representing all of the diversity that we have at the city. So I won't go through all of those, but if you have questions, we can talk about them. And lastly, the last slide is just a summary of our recommendations to the committee, particularly around the boards and commissions discussion. And I will conclude our staff presentation with that and open to all the questions that you have.
Mr. Clerk, do we have any public comments on this?
Chair, we do not have any requests to speak.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So we can come back to council members. Any questions, comments? Councilmember Lipcott-Ames.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Cotton Gaines and Mr. Pierce for this presentation. And welcome. You've been with the city now about 6-8 months? 5?
5 months, about 30 days, I think.
Okay, but who's counting? Well, welcome. It's nice to see you at the desk. So thank you so much for this update. And I just have a number of questions and they're in no particular order. So let me just try to roll through them here. With respect to the survey of board and commission members, in the staff report, it indicated we had received 34 responses, but we didn't get the denominator. How many board and commission members are there? So what sort of response rate did we get?
Of the previous survey or the,
Yes, the previous survey.
give us one moment and we can pull that up if you want to ask the next question in the meantime.
Relatedly, just in an attempt to ascertain the, you know, how robust was this set of responses? Was it half of them? Was it 3/4 of them? It would also be great to know then in looking at the data, what is the city's overall demographic profile so that we can see as we're looking at these data from board and commission respondents, how do they actually compare to city residents overall?
And the 2021 results, and I'm sorry we did not include that in the report, but I can pull up those numbers. The representation on the boards and commissions did not quite match the corresponding demographic groups within the community.
So I think that would be great to have, the next time this comes around, to have that answer on the page, really so the public can see it and we're transparent about this. I think one of my themes in my questioning is going to be, if we want to demonstrate that race and equity matter to this community, we want to be always thinking about, is this an opportunity to present more information? Is this an opportunity to share some data? Is this an opportunity to give an update? And I think expecting people to go back and dig it up and find it and figure it out themselves, it doesn't facilitate that sort of, engagement with the material. So, Okay, awesome. In terms of how to assess the socioeconomic status of board and commission members, I appreciate that the second survey, this year's survey, does seem to get us out of the woods of ambiguity. What is your socioeconomic status? And gives them some income bands. But I was struck by the fact that the lowest band, 150,000 and below, is roughly the area median income for a family of four. So what we're actually doing is prioritizing or preferencing in terms of being more granular above 150,000. We're sort of signaling that we're more interested in those folks because we're being more granular from 150 to 250, 250 to 350, above 350. And all the folks who are making less than 150 get the takeaway like, well, you're just below this line. So I think it sends actually a message of not mattering that we don't intend to send. And I think probably in the next iteration that I would encourage you, I didn't mean to say probably, in the next iteration, I would encourage you to just take the area median income and make that your middle band. You know, let's pretend it's 150, you know, to do sort of a band around it as your middle line, and then to have a total of 5, 2 below and 2 above it, or a total of 7, 3 below and 3 above it. And so we can really see, you know, or do quartiles or just something where from 0 to whatever is the first band, and from that to whatever is the next band, and then you have your middle band and so on. I think it's a way to put on the page, you know, a question that contemplates everybody equally, because everybody is contained in one of those bands rather than just sort of falling below the line, which is what it currently is if you're under 150. The other thing is, I know you're trying to get at retirees versus people who are still working. It occurs to me that if you're in a household of 2 people making 350 or above, that's a very different situation than if you're in a household of 5 or 6 people making 350 and above. And I don't know how to get at this. How many income earners are there in the family, or how many dependents? I'm not sure, but and I think it begs the question, why are we even asking this, and what is it we want to know? But there are probably ways to get at, you know, the more granular answer to the question, how wealthy or unwealthy are the people who serve on boards and commissions? So I think you've made great progress, and there's probably still some fine tuning to do. May I continue?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of updates on work assignments, I appreciate on item L that the Ivy Planning Group has identified 5 themes and suggestions for next steps on the workforce culture assessment. And I'm curious, honestly, just curious as to why that's going directly to City Council as opposed to coming back through Policy and Services. This is a question in my capacity as a new PNS member, trying to understand the flow of things.
There really isn't a specific reason, if I'm being entirely honest. We want to make sure that we can share the information soon with council so that we can have it out there publicly. But if that needed to go through this committee, that's absolutely fine.
I'm not
Mhm.
suggesting that it should. I'm truly asking.
Yeah, in particular, given the expectation that the council as a whole will want to engage in the material, we thought that a study session for the full council would be in order. And so rather than do it twice, we went ahead and recommending that we do it with the full council.
I guess I was thinking if it came to us first, we might have a recommendation for council as to what they ought to do. But if it's a study session, then okay, got it. In terms of item C, the RIPA data, I'm glad you mentioned, Ms. Cotton Gaines, kind of where we are. You've said we have signed an agreement and started a conversation with the National Policing Institute. And I'm just wondering if you could be a little bit more specific as to what starting the conversation means, when we think we're going to have some analysis. These data have been relatively recently available, and we've got information on a website and a dashboard, but I think how to really make sense of the data is to be in dialogue with the truth of it and to be able to share with the community where we are. And so that next level of analysis is really critical to being able to unpack and discern and make any sense of it. So I'm just wondering when what we think this time frame is going to be.
Yes, thank you for that question. And also, we're being highly supported on this by the police department. So that's why Captain Rush Schneider is also on the line. Though our office is leading it, they're definitely partnered with us. I want to give them that credit. In terms of the timeline, we had the first meeting a couple weeks ago. So the next step that the National Policing Institute has is to give me the exact timeline, but I would like to get something back this year is really a goal that we have. I don't yet know how realistic that is until I hear back from the Policing Institute. But what I can say is that everything you just referenced is why we've been so particular with making sure we chose a partner that really understood how to work with this kind of data. So this is new for cities of our size to have this volume of information, and there could be a natural inclination to just make simple conclusions off of it. So what we're at a baseline asking the National Policing Institute to do is help us understand what you can actually conclude and not conclude as a starting place with this type of data that we have, and what are comparison points. So that's a starting place of what they'll do, and then they'll show us some of the initial analysis we can do. And because it took me so long to get the contract done, we also have the benefit of 2 years of data, which originally we would have only had 1. So that's a positive thing that they could at least compare us year over year as well.
Do we have a multi-year contract with the National Policing Institute, or is this a one-time thing?
So we actually are benefiting from something called the Knowledge Lab with one of the federal agencies that I am not remembering the name of right now. But this initial work that we're doing with the National Policing Institute is for this project, and then we can always add more on after that.
This project meaning the 2022 and 2023 data, period.
Yes. So I'd say
Okay.
this is like our baseline
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
That is their assignment, is to help
Yeah.
us establish that as a baseline.
So we obviously need to see how this goes. We need to see if they're able to give us what we're looking for. I'm not even sure we know what we're looking for because this is all new. But some way to take, a complex data set and, offer up some conclusions, things to focus on, things to be worried about, things to be proud of. I think we all ought to be prepared to interrogate that report when it comes, so that we, what do we want to ask for next time, right?
Exactly.
And is the National Policing Institute is it a think tank? Is it affiliated with law enforcement?
I believe it's a nonprofit. I'll look that up though.
Okay.
And then I have a few follow-ups to questions you've asked earlier, if you're open to that. The total number of board and commission members is about 52. So to answer that question. And then the Palo Alto demographics, and I'm sorry, this is a lot of numbers, but we will make sure we include this in the report next time, but I'll still say them now. Our demographics for white alone is 51%. Black or African American is 2.1%. American Indian and Alaska Native is 0.3%. Asian alone is a 34.8%, or around a 35. Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander is 0.2%. 2 or more races is 8.9%. Hispanic or Latino is 7.3%. Oh, sorry. And white alone, not Hispanic or Latino, is 48.7%. And this was as of 2021. So
Okay.
we'll include that information next time.
Okay, thank you. Because I think where we want to get is how representative are the boards and commissions of the city. And so being able to do that side by side would be fantastic. And while I'm on that subject, I think this is a question, the question, what do we do with it? I am very much in favor of giving it to council to just have as a reference point or to inform council rather than to be pegging, a certain number of seats for people from a certain demographic. I for one, and I'll be curious to hear what my colleagues feel about this, simply I want us to be more aware of who we are as a city. So as we're selecting, we can be more aware of, how are we doing with our representation lately. Okay, I'm gonna try to wrap up here. Item D, on PERT was marked as completed, yet I know that our PERT effort, sorry, no, I just want to provide the opportunity for you. No worries. Our item D, PERT, was marked as completed, yet I know that our first effort kind of stalled shortly out of the blocks in that the mental health clinician resigned. And I'm wondering, it's great that it's going to be back up and running soon. Do we know whether the clinician resigned for reasons having nothing to do with her employment with the city versus not finding this to be an attractive, I shouldn't say employment with the city, sorry. Did she leave because of the work or did she leave because of her own life circumstance? If the former, I think we ought to be interested in what are we doing to try to ensure that we retain the next team that comes aboard.
Our understanding is that individual left out of the area. So it was a decision to relocate out of the immediate area or really out of the region. Now also just for awareness, the employees are actually employees of the county of Santa Clara, and we do understand that they're going through a selection process for replacement. So it was really our attempt in terms of annotating it as complete, is it really now moves into the category of an ongoing program. Unfortunately, vacancies in ongoing programs are a part of, as the council knows, a part of our day-to-day operation.
Thank you. Just two more comments.
And the only
questions.
thing I'll add to that is we keep that in this update because we know that it's of interest to this body. So we always include something about PERT as well as the trust program in these updates, just so that you stay aware.
Just a couple more things. Item E referenced Senate Bill 1421 and Assembly Bill 748. And I didn't know what those were. And simply because these staff reports are meant to inform not just us up here, but the public. I think when we have shorthand like that, where we assume those of us in the work know what it stands for, I had to look it up, disclosure of sensitive police personnel records. It might be great to just have that parenthetical, again, to make the information more transparent to members of the public who are curious. And then finally, CDAW, I'm glad you raised it, Ms. Cotton Gaines. My understanding, just from an article I found online, is that this one has been a real long time coming for our city, that the HRC unanimously recommended we put together an ordinance back in 2018. It took council, early 2018, took council to late 2018 to act on it. It was referred to Policy and Services. And here we are, these many, many years later, we still don't have it. And International Women's Day just passed. And it's kind of that annual time when people say, like, what's happening with our CDAW effort? And for those who don't know, I think, what did we say it stands for? The
Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women.
And I think it's actually Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of
yeah.
Discrimination Against Women. They just left that part out of the acronym. So this strikes me as sort of like the Equal Rights Amendment that we all thought was going to pass and make things better, and it never did. And, I think the city is very focused on gender equity right now. And it would be fabulous. I know there's a lot on the work plan. And I'm just putting in a plug for that one to make it out of the gate this year, because I think it's overdue.
Thank you. I agree, and we are definitely working on it. And I appreciate the community members who also check in with us regularly on it.
That's all for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Great questions and comments. Councilmember Tanaka?
Yeah, thank you guys for your work on this. And I agree with most of my colleagues' comments, just a few additional ones. So in terms of income, it's a bit of a sensitive topic. So I assume all this stuff is optional, right? People don't actually have to answer it.
Correct. The survey is optional, and each question within the survey is optional as well.
Okay. And then I think the other thing is, there's a lot of focus on income. I know a lot of people, well, I can't say a lot, but there's a good fair number of people in our community whose wealth isn't their income, it's actually their assets, right? So, maybe the income is inconsequential, but their assets could be enormous. So I don't know how you deal with that. That's why it's very kind of a complex question. And then, the other situation is, depending on the number of people in the household, kind of like what my colleague said, matters a lot as well. So anyways, just some things to think about. In regards to, I agree with my colleague in terms of, I don't think there should be some sort of quota that we have to hit for demographics. I think that doesn't seem to make sense to me. But one thing I've always thought about, and it's something which maybe future councils could think about, is right now the way we do it is we pick commission members or board members, kind of like we all vote together on it. But what I wonder, what might be more representative is actually to, because all of our boards commissions don't actually have any power, right? It's all advisory. There's no real authority they have per se. And so really, I think what we want is for our boards commissions to have that diversity of perspectives so that by the time it goes to council, things have been fully vetted. And so one thing I've thought about, and I suggested before, but I'll suggest again tonight, is instead of we vote, the majority vote who gets on and doesn't get on, what might be more interesting is actually each council member appoints whoever they feel like. And that way, the commissions and boards are reflective of the council member's opinion, because eventually this is going to go to the council. And because right now what happens is majority picks, which means that you have more uniform perspectives on different topics. So in the spirit of more diversity, I think that might be better. It's probably too late for this year's council, but maybe in future councils they could consider it.
I'm sorry, I was just thinking about what Councilmember Tanaka was saying. So you're talking about a format of how the commissioners and board members are appointed, not so much delving into the demographics.
Well, it's a little bit both, right? Because I think the issue with when we do majority votes is that you don't necessarily get the diversity of people because of the fact that it's a majority, and the majority might be like, well, we want all this kind of people. But really, especially given that in our city, some other cities is different, but in our city, the boards and commissions are all purely advisory. None of them have any, the council holds final authority. And so really what we want on our boards commission is a vigorous debate on whatever issue it happens to be, because it's better that they have that debate and figure out, the flaws in their different arguments than we do it. So it's more just a way I think that might help future councils be more efficient and effective.
I appreciate that. I think that's something that council will have to decide in terms of the format, but I think that we can take that under advisement for the council. And I think also that I would hate to say that our boards and commissions don't have the power. They are advisory. I think there's some power to that. They're giving advice to the council members, to help them formulate the decision with a lot of information, and also discussions with the community amongst themselves, etc. So I think that there is some power there where they're making a recommendation to council. And I also want to make sure that it is known that they're very valuable to the council and that we appreciate the work that they do for us and for this city. I appreciate the questions on assignment C. But I was kind of looking at it that we're depending on DOJ to finish up with their studies in April. Can we rely on that finishing so that the police department can do their work with the analysis? And I guess the other question is, approximately when would we see or get a report on the analysis from 2022 and 2023?
So I'll take part of that and I'll give Captain Reifschneider the second part of it. For the when we'll see it, that's the piece of it that I should have an estimated timeline from the National Policing Institute within this month, and I can report that back to this committee. As soon as I know, I'm hopeful it will be within this calendar year that we'll have that analysis. For the question on the DOJ and getting the data back finalized to the city, I'll give that to Captain Reifschneider.
Good evening, council members. So with regard to the timing, the short answer is yes, we're confident we'll get it back quickly from DOJ. They have a standardized timeline. Agencies are required to submit their data to DOJ by the end of February, which we did. And then DOJ estimates that they can turn it around within the month of March. Which they were able to do last year. And I think this year it's a more streamlined process. So we're confident that they can comply. And that will put us on schedule to do what we were able to do last year, which was to publish our data to our own dashboard in April, as well as the raw data. And also at the same time, be in a position to provide the 2022 and 2023 data to National Policing Institute to begin their analysis.
And so will council see the analysis, or will it be posted on the PD website?
The 2023 data, correct me if I'm wrong, Captain, will go straight to the dashboard site. Is that correct, Captain Reifschneider?
Yes, so the data itself will be published to the police department's website in April, both in its raw format for those that want to consume it that way, and also as part of the dashboard that we already have live for the 2022 data. As for the analysis of the 2022 and 2023 data that's to be performed by the National Policing Institute, I think we're still finalizing or discussing what the format of that analysis ends up being and exactly in what format it's presented both to council and to the public.
And I think I'll just add on to that, that when the dashboard is updated, we will inform the council. And then for the actual analysis, we will likely come to this committee.
Okay, thank you. And I remember also when it went up on the dashboard, there was a notice to the public that it is up on the dashboard. Okay, very good. Councilmember Lithcott-Haynes mentioned PERT. And I think I was talking to a city manager today and basically saying that, yeah, we managed to complete it, but then now we have that vacancy and it's taking a long time in order to have a PERT officer back with us. So, hopefully that's not something that happens often and it doesn't take so long, and there should be more PERT officers available so that we can ensure that when the position is available, that and the funding also, that we do fulfill it. So the attachment B is from 2021. I was wondering if there was any feedback or a survey that went out to the board and commissioners, just to kind of get a feel of how they felt doing this survey.
That's a great question. We did not formally ask them. We received a little bit of feedback just informally from commissioners I know that shared it. And overall, there seemed to be an appreciation and understanding of why we're collecting it. I think most noteworthy is we didn't have 100% response rate. So I think that's speaking to folks really either were busy and didn't have time, or they recognized if they felt uncomfortable filling it out that they didn't have to. So I think the positive of the survey is we'll always have that ability. The negative of the survey format is that we will always have some gaps in our data because not everyone will fill out the survey. So I think that's a little bit of sort of informally the feedback we've received, and also why we're interested in asking some of the optional demographic questions on the application, because then you get a little more consistency to data over time as opposed to just relying upon the survey.
Thank you. Yeah, I did have a concern, that, and I'm glad that council members brought it up, that this is informational for us and for the city. But also qualifications matter. So I do want to make sure that we do not forget about qualifications, even with our volunteers who are in the positions that they are for board and commissions. But it is data, so I appreciate that. And so with this, I don't know if council members have any more questions and comments. If not, then we'll try to answer your questions. Councilmember?
I'll just offer, Captain Reifschneider, thank you so much for being here. And you know, as I've tried to make sense of the RIPA data available on the dashboard, it's clearly a very rich and complex data set. When I think about what are we going to do with this? What are we trying to learn? What's the story we're trying to tell? For example, I just put in, looked at the average stop duration when a person is stopped by the police. In the top right, there's a green box and you can click, you know, the average for everybody, and then you can click by perceived race or ethnicity. And the average stop time for all vehicle stops is 27.53 minutes. For the Hispanic and Latino population, it is very similar to that average, 27.62 minutes. For people perceived as Asian, it's 18.88 minutes. For white folks, it's slightly above the average at 28.17 minutes. And for Black people, it's a full 10 minutes longer, 38.93 minutes. That's one tiny example of a set of data that prompts a question. What's going on? Why is it that way? And it might be useful when we think about the kind of presentation we hope to have on these data to come up with 5 or 7 questions, perhaps informed by the Policing Institute, that really help us understand what are these data telling us about what it's like to be a person of various backgrounds encountering law enforcement in the city. I don't purport to have those questions in mind, but knowing what we want, what would we like to ask of these data? I think that is, if I had the opportunity to sit down with the Policing Institute, you know, I would be asking that type of question. What can these data tell us? What should we be asking of these data so that we're really, you know, the data is allowing us to better understand a very complex situation.
And to answer the question from a while ago about the Policing Institute, it's the National Policing Institute was established in the 1970 as a nonpartisan and independent nonprofit organization. You have all the hard questions today. They are located on the East Coast, but I don't remember where. I will find it.
Looks like Arlington, Virginia. I just found it.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple more points that I just kind of thought of. So on the BCC, on the board members and commission, I think, you know, the question on education, I mean, employers also ask about education, all that. But what I've also come to find is that there is the academia, which also works a lot on what they learn in education, maybe a lot of it on theory and hypothesis and all that. But then there's also those who have ground level knowledge too, because they're there every day, they do the work, you know. So I would hope that as we're looking at so I'm just kind of hoping that the question on education doesn't stop others from participating in joining a board or commission. And again, like I said earlier, we should not forget about qualifications, what they can offer. So I'll just go to the questions regarding that you asked about how should the board and commission demographic survey response. I think you gave a recommendation. I want to ask my colleagues how they feel about it. So the recommendation from staff is to provide demographic data on the current composition of board and commission and corresponding data for Palo Alto as a whole as a reference prior to making new BCC appointments. Is that something, what are your thoughts about that, Councilmember Tanaka?
I actually think that we should be like race blind. But you know, of course, people show up and you see them, so it's a little bit hard to do that. But I think, yeah, I think it should be based purely on merit and people's ability. And but I think it's good for us to know because we could also change the kind of outreach we do. But you know, I think right now the council selects people, right? And like I said, I still think that we should be. I still think it's better that council members select a proxy for themselves because that way it's more realistic. Like the commissions and board will have the same maybe philosophical thinkings of the council member, and so by the time the issue hits the council, it's more fully vetted, reflective of what the council will do, and more of the issues could be fleshed out. So I think in terms of socioeconomic demographics, I think it's good to track, but I don't think it should be the deciding factor of how we select people.
I move the staff recommendation on item 1. Is that a sufficient way to put it?
Second. Would you like to speak to? I don't have anything to say either. Well, actually I do. Sorry. I was gonna just say that, you know, just to Councilmember Tanaka's point, this is an informational item for council to be aware of.
Correct. I think with all of this information, I appreciate you referencing that, Chair Koo, that it is data for the council for awareness. And when we track it over time, we're able to see changes. It's not intended for any presumption of a certain amount of seats or any quota or anything that actually may violate law in any kind of way.
Thank you. So shall we take a vote on 1?
Councilmember Lifcott Haynes,
Yes.
Chair Koo,
Yes,
Councilmember Tanaka.
Yes.
The motion carries. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Clerk. And then the second part of this, the recommendation is that we accept this report, including the plans.
Yes, but before that, I think it would be good to clarify the socioeconomic status piece of it. I've heard feedback from the committee, so maybe I should try to offer what I think I heard, and then you can tell me if I've heard incorrectly. That it is good for us to assess the socioeconomic status for the board and commission members, that maybe there's a way for us to be a bit more granular in the income categories if we're asking them. And that we don't want to violate people's personal comfort zone with asking such granular info. But it sounds like this idea of a multiple choice question is of interest to this group, as opposed to a more open-ended question. That's what I can summarize of the discussion to this moment.
Thank you for that. I think that largely represents certainly where I am. As a practical matter, you've just put the survey out, right? Haven't we just put that new survey out? It's done.
So this would be prospective. This would be for future surveys, just like we shifted it between last time and this time. If we want to make changes, we would do that for next year's survey.
So I think because of the timing, it feels almost premature to be trying to nail this down any further. Why don't we see what happens with the one you've put out there? Does it yield less frustration on the part of respondents or confusion? You know, do we feel like we're getting data back that we can use? That would be my recommendation. And then just to the chair's point about the value of lived experience and not overly preferencing an academic pedigree of some kind, but also with an eye toward the curiosity about socioeconomic status. I wonder what folks would think of a question that is, would you describe your career as largely blue collar, largely white collar, or a mix of both? Forgive me if those terms are considered offensive in any way. I'm not aware that they are, but what I'm getting at is there's tremendous value, obviously, gained when you work in blue collar fields. And typically the education level required is different than for white collar. And yet, you know, essential to have those perspectives on our boards and commissions. So I'm just trying to think outside the box about another way to get at the type of background, experience, and perspective we'd like to be sure we're including on our various boards and commissions.
Thank you. We'll also do some additional research since we have the benefit of time for next year, and we can share what we find.
So I see the other question that you have here under the recommendations is when results should be shared with council. Do you,
In the motion you just passed, I just want to clarify, the idea is we share it before you do the appointment. So that was the when question of, is it something that you will want to know before you make the appointments or after you make the appointment? So it sounds like before is the interest.
right, so that's already answered also. So with that, we'll just go to what. So we accept the report.
Yes.
Okay, I make the motion that we accept the report and recommend to council at the study session.
I'm sorry, say that last part again.
It says staff recommends the Policy and Services Committee accept this report, including the plans to bring a study session to the city council in Q2.
Yes, I think you can end it there.
Okay,
Yes. That sounds
I
good.
move that.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. What is the study session going to be on?
The study session is the report out on the assessment done by IB Planning Group. So that
On
relates
workplace culture issues?
culture, environment, not necessarily issues. Yes. That relates to assignment L, in case you were trying to track where it is in the report.
Madam Chair, would you accept an amendment to the motion that says including the plans to bring a study session to the council on Ms. Cotton Gaines, is it on item L,
Assignment,
Assignment L.
assignment L?
yeah, I would accept.
I'll second.
And Mr. Clerk, if you add after city council on assignment L in Q2. Looks good. I don't need to speak on it. Would you like to speak on it? Thank you.
And we'll bring the other motion that passed to council on consent. And this item will just plan for the study session, just so you know what staff's next steps will be.
Thank you for telling us that.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Chair Ku,
Yes,
Councilmember Lipcott Haynes,
Yes.
that the motion carries. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Clerk. And this concludes item number 1, and we'll move to item number 2, which is discussion and recommendation to council on potential allocation of $2,000 annually from the city council contingency fund to each council member for expenditures consistent with defined purposes. Madam Attorney?
Thank you very much. This is part 2 of your discussion on this item. We had brought to you last time an open-ended discussion about an open-ended report that identified a number of potential purposes that the committee could focus on. And the committee was interested in reimbursement for actual and necessary expenses, and particularly interested in the City of Mountain View's procedure. So we have gathered a number of procedures on actual reimbursement, including one from your very own city. So those are all included in this packet. There are some differences between them, but there are more similarities than differences. They focus on travel and standard reimbursement for city required activities. And we are happy to continue along in this vein with you if you would like to direct us of perhaps modifications that you'd like to see to the city's existing policy, or other aspects you'd like to consider using those various cities that we've included as examples for ideas, or you may have other ideas. I would like to note that I've heard a couple of specific ideas from committee members that actually fall outside of this lane, though, and they're really in a potentially different type of policy, maybe back to some of the other things that we brought forward to you as potential ideas last time. So just to note, too, that were mentioned perhaps informally and as examples and not with a lot of thought or intended to be, the committee's preferred scope. But Councilmember Lithcott-Hames, if I may, just in conversation with Councilmember Lithcott-Hames, she mentioned expenses that she incurs from time to time for various events that she may sponsor, or maybe sponsors a strong word, organize for community development and other types of community activities. And so that doesn't fall within this approach, because those are not council directed or council assigned tasks. Those are really personal initiative items. And then Councilmember Tanaka mentioned at the last meeting some interest in perhaps stipends for folks who he retains their services to assist him in his council member duties. That issue, on looking on that further, raises a lot of complex issues, really potentially changing the governance system of the council to be looking at paid staff for council members. And we really think that that's outside of the scope of what it is that council directed in this referral. So if the committee is interested in that, my recommendation would be to please call that out, and let's go back to council and see whether council wants an exploration of that issue. That concludes my comments. If city manager has additional input, otherwise we wait your feedback.
Sure. I would just perhaps editorialize based on the city attorney's comments that to the extent that the committee and ultimately council wants to focus on necessary expenses, that is a relatively straightforward issue. And I think with sufficient clarity on the types of expenses that the council wants to include, I hope that we could wrap that up fairly quickly. And I would just note that the other category, as the city attorney pointed out, does raise the prospect of requiring more work to define and parameters and define how that would actually work. So, thank you.
Thank you for the report, and thank you for tracking down those comparable policies from neighboring municipalities. I know we asked for that last month and you were like, that's a lot. And here we are. So thank you. Appreciate it. I'm finding myself, I'm always curious and sometimes perplexed by the loop between council and its committees. And so I know that this committee discussed this on February 13th, but when did council refer it to this committee and what was the referral? And was it part of a larger, was it tied into the council member compensation colleagues memo?
Great question. I'll take that one. This actually came, the text of the title is really the text that came from the city council, and it was from your annual discussion of your procedures and protocols handbook. When we reorganized the entire thing, this topic had come up and the council sent it to committee. So this was around March and April 2023. So about a year ago.
So I would like to add that there is an interface. Although it didn't originate with the council compensation discussion, there is an interface there because council determined that you would like your compensation to be adjusted to the max permitted by state law. And the Palo Alto Charter currently incorporates the state law limit. That could be changed in the future, but assuming that we're working under current charter provision. So what that means is that any additional funds have to not be salary because your salary will be raised to the max. And so there are ways to do that. And one is actual and necessary reimbursement for official activities is not considered to be salary. If it has all these bells and whistles, it's pursuant to a policy, there are receipts, you're reimbursed, there's a record, it's auditable, those are public records produced on request. There also could be other things that council could have been interested in with this referral, such as saying that for a relatively small dollar amount, individual council members should be able to direct some of those funds towards what would otherwise be small city grants to community, for example. That would not be salary to you. It's not then becoming personal to a council member. So it does need to be in a lane that defines it outside of salary because your salary will be increased to the current allowable amount.
Okay, thank you. So I appreciate the city attorney's clarification that some of the examples that were raised by us last time, my example of putting on events that I might have expenses, receipts for, Councilmember Tanaka's notion of paying stipends to assistants or interns, that your sense is, clear sense is that those are not allowable. And I am personally not inclined to try to push for further on those fronts. I was intrigued that the comparable municipalities seem to reimburse for travel related stuff and technology related stuff and communication, which could be technology, sort of phones, but also, written communication like letterhead and, whatnot, and travel. And I think the technology allowance in Sunnyvale is something that I am interested in my colleagues' thoughts on. It feels to be a way to acknowledge that we are at personal expense using our technology to benefit the city, and it might be nice to get some reimbursement on that. The final thing that I want to offer is the suggestions in the staff report about what we might want to direct, say, $2,000 a year toward, included things that really didn't come up in the comparables. So, City Attorney, you mentioned discretionary dollars to allocate during budget setting, small grants to community organizations. And I'm wondering if those seem to be not contemplated by local cities. So I'm wondering, am I wrong?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to distract you or cut you off with my gesture. We focused on where we heard the committee direct us last time, which was words were used that conveyed to us that you were interested in a program of reimbursement for actual and necessary expenses. So that's what we focused on. There are some programs, and in fact, my colleague Mark Vani, who's here helping us with technical issues, assisted the city of San Jose with a grant program that was allocated to individual city council members in his prior city, the city of San Jose. So those do exist. We did not survey for those.
If I could also add, part of the reason I believe that we made reference to grants to other organizations is that in the referral from the full council, it was described as coming from the council contingency. And the council contingency has been used for that type of grant or expenditure on a one-time basis with procedures established by the city council. And so we wanted to make that linkage as well.
And right now, the council contingency fund is dispersed according to the mayor's and the vice mayor's wishes. Is that correct?
You've actually got a whole section on it in your procedures and protocols handbook. If anyone remembers off the top of your head, you could describe it in a nutshell. I think it's up to $10,000
Yeah.
can be dispersed at the mayor and vice mayor, assuming agreement between the two of them. They would announce it to the full council, and unless there's a disagreement by a majority of the council that would proceed, then anything larger would require a council vote.
And maybe it would be helpful to remind the committee of what types of things has council spent that contingency money on?
Let's see. Most recently, there was a contribution for relief in the Maui fire. Prior to that, I think we might have used it for UNAF and for, let's see, what was the other?
Also, the community services, youth, YCS.
YCS, yes, on a one-time grant as well. So as either events or particular needs have identified themselves, that's what the contingency has been used for.
I think the mayor has just allocated some funds for the Ramadan break fast in the coming month. You're looking the other way. I thought that had happened. Anyway, the reason I'm asking this is so if the mayor and vice mayor can come up with up to 10,000, and as long as the council doesn't disapprove, it goes. It sounds like we're saying maybe a fifth of that, 2,000 per council member, would be allowable for each one of us to arrive at our own discretion. And there's no concerns about improper influence with us directing money to outside organizations?
So you would still need to have a policy that puts some parameters around that. Certainly, conflict of interest rules would still apply. And would need to be some process, probably minimal because a small amount. But when the city gives grants to organizations, there are certain minimal things that we do require. We typically have agreements, we use templates, and sometimes they're very streamlined for very small grants, but they do require things like that grant recipients expend their money without discriminating. For example, sometimes if there's going to be an event or an occurrence, we want there to be proper insurance, because if the city's funding it, then we'll potentially be responsible if something goes awry. So those kinds of things, it's not a standardless type of situation. There still needs to be some parameters around that.
Thank you. That's it for my questions.
Councilmember Tanaka, do you mind if we go to public first before you? Okay. Mr. Clerk, can we go and can we see if there's any public comments on this item?
Chair, there are no requests to speak.
Thank you. Councilmember Tanaka, do you have any comments or questions?
Let's see, I guess my thoughts are the same as last time, so I'll just repeat that, which is, Mountain View gets $900 a year cell phone plan, $4,000 technology budget for one term for laptops, et cetera. And then they have $8,000 in a year travel budget. Now, I think we allocated $2,000, so I think $2,000 is what we have at our discretion. So I would say $2,000 for that, or if council members want to have it go, it sounds like it's more complex to actually give it to a organization or to donate it. So maybe just keep it simple and do kind of like what other cities do, although $2,000 is way less than what Mountain View does right now. But anyways, it's kind of what I said last time.
Well, thank you. Thank you for looking into all the other cities and bringing back some information. So I think, did the council say that $2,000 would be coming from the council contingency fund? Okay. And I think we would have to really have some framework and parameters in how the funds are being used. We have a reimbursement policy right now that seems pretty sufficient. I guess I should speak for myself. When I do travels, like I said last time, I'm often reimbursed for registration, airfare, hotel, food. If I take Uber, whatever that, I've gone to classes in San Francisco and was reimbursed as long as it pertained to what I'm learning for the city. So for the most part, all of that is reimbursable. So as a matter of fact, it's very clean because it's not something that, how do you say, most of the time the clerk takes care of it. And then if I have any receipts, it's an itemized receipt that I provide to them and I'm reimbursed. So it's very clean and easy to take care of. I know that we use our own phones, at least I do, my own computer. I know some cities have a technologist fund, equipment fund and all that, but I just want to clarify that in providing that piece of equipment, it has to be all about the city. Yes?
It does.
So no
It's
private emails.
It's what's called de minimis private use, which means very small, minor, incidental private use, because maybe it's an accident or, it needs to be very minimal.
And it's very much open to public records requests.
Yes.
I think that applies no matter what. Even if it's personal.
Yeah, well, so Councilmember Tanaka said it applies anyways, even with personal, right? So it applies all around. And I thought when I joined the city, we were offered a tablet or iPad. I don't remember because I didn't use it. And is that something that the city still offers or?
So I don't believe we're doing that now, mainly because of standardization on the type of equipment that we use. But I do recall, as you're pointing out, that in years past, there were experiments with that.
Okay. Yeah, I know I didn't get it because it was an Apple and I'm a PC person, so couldn't adapt it fast enough. And then, in terms of events, right? We would have to have a parameter around that also. What are the approved type of events that the funds could go towards? So I think there's a lot more work that needs to go into vetting and setting the parameters. And I don't think $2,000 should take a long time to set up all the parameters, right? So I am not quite sure how to go with this. And so I'll take suggestions.
How about we just adopt Mountain View's policy up to $2,000?
Well, it's simple just to adopt their program, but you still have to set the parameters of what the $2,000 can be used for.
What they do, just take it verbatim, just change it to $2,000 and call it done. Because we're not talking about a lot of money here, right? It's like $14,000 total. And if you just think about how much time staff spends on this, we've always spent $14,000 on this. So, anyways, I just think Mountain View is our neighboring city. They have much smaller budget than we do. And so it's probably not a bad reference. They probably didn't get it too wrong.
So what pages of this, of the attachment B are you looking at that tells you that?
I think it's B. I think they did a whole bunch of cities.
Yeah, but in attachment B under Mountain View, where would it be? Because I don't know what their
It
policy.
starts on, oh, mine says 42.
Oh, really?
How is that possible?
Okay. It's either 42 or 48.
Oh, that's the authorized expenses, right? And is that the authorized expense for what Councilmember Tanaka said was 900 for something, 4,000 for another, and 8,000 for travel budget?
Oh, gotcha.
What was the 4,000 on?
The 4,000, so what happens in Mountain View is each council member gets $900 a year to pay for their cell phone bill. They get $4,000 for each term. So if they're in two terms, that's $8,000, and they can spend it for a laptop, they can spend it for a cell phone, they can spend it for, an iPad or whatever. And then there's an $8,000 a year travel budget. Now, I think from council, we have a $2,000 annual thing. So that means what I would suggest is, we could use it for the same thing, but it's limited to $2,000. So we'll be at, compared to Mountain View, which would be at, I guess, let me just do the math there, they're about 10,000 a year. So we'll be 5 times less, and their budget is way smaller than ours. So we'll have a expense equivalent to theirs, but at 1/5 the size. And my feeling is that we're talking about $14,000 total. Almost every city has some sort of reimbursement policy for the council members for this kind of stuff, except for us. And this is a much smaller amount than our neighboring city, which has a smaller budget than us. So to me, we could spend a lot of time talking about this, but the time that staff spends on this will far exceed the $14,000 we're talking about.
But we're not really talking about, so $2,000, yes, that's the amount, but we're talking about what kind of parameters we set in order to spend that kind of money that actually is in, we have to be responsible and accountable for that money and how we spend it. It's the taxpayers' money. So I think what I'm hearing is how do we set parameters on how we spend that money? Not so much that it's a large amount or a small amount compared to another city. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
So Madam Chair and committee members, when the city does have a policy, and it is also in your packet, it is a little narrower than Mountain View's policy. So I think the way we would implement Councilmember Tanaka's suggestion, if it is the interest of the committee, would be to crosswalk the ways in which Mountain View is a bit broader, and then to make a list of those additional areas as a recommendation to council, if that is indeed what the committee is interested in doing. The city's policy is attachment F. Okay, and Ms. Cotton Gaines says packet page 72.
The city's policy doesn't have anything regarding technology, right?
That's correct.
It's really focused on travel. And what we're hearing from Mountain View and Sunnyvale and perhaps others is they're acknowledging that there are significant expenses associated with the technology we need in order to do the work of the city. And that's what I'm hearing Councilmember Tanaka speaking to.
Yes,
Yeah.
that would be, I think, one of the key areas that we would add then from Mountain View.
But to his point, he's got numbers on what Mountain View allows. That didn't make it into the packet. So I'm wondering if anybody's got something, if we're going to take Mountain View as a template for how we might craft a technology policy with the dollar limits that adjusted. Do we have anywhere, does anybody know where the Mountain View chart is that gives these dollar amounts?
We didn't look at that because the council referral identified $2,000. I don't see any reason why the committee couldn't return to council with a recommendation for a higher number. If that's what the committee wanted to do, council can do with it, what the majority feels is right. But we did not look at budgeting issues.
You know, honestly, so I kind of like our reimbursement policy the way that it is. I have no issue with the 2,000 except to set some parameters around it. If it's a technology fund you want, I guess, you know, we just have to set parameters around the technology fund. And so if it's Mountain Views or Sunnyvales, whichever one, please refer to that and make the motion or further discussions, whichever it is.
Madam Chair, so just in talking with my colleague, there are a couple of other areas where we know where the Mountain View policy is a bit broader. One is that it does allow council members to be reimbursed for business development activities. I think the policy says typically involving one or more staff members. There are a couple of cities that use that language. And what was the third issue? Oh, spouse. Right. So there's a provision that we noticed there that is not, I didn't see it in any of the other cities, that 4 times a year, a council member can bring a guest to a city or regional event, and that city funds can be used to pay the ticket or the cost of that guest. That would be another way in which Mountain View is broader.
Including hotel and airfare or just a registration fee?
I don't think so. I think it's more of a
Dinner.
meal, a single event, a single night event, a ticketed event.
Ticket event, okay.
Frankly, that's a wonderful illustration of how these rules are out of sync with the times. You know, those rules were written in a time when it was largely men in the dais and they needed to be able to bring their largely female partners with them to dinners. And what my interest is in not being out of pocket for the various things that I do for the city. And, you know, really trying to bring a little bit more of a financial reality check to what it's like to serve here. In this capacity, and being reimbursed for reasonable technology expenses feels exciting to me, except for the restriction that it can't be, right, I only have one laptop. You know, my Zoom account is, I have to pay for my Zoom, I got to pay for my laptop, I got to pay for my cell phone, you know, and my life is largely city work. But it sounds like, even given that it is not de minimis personal use, that I would really be in a situation of having to buy an entirely new set of equipment and only use that for the city in order to get the reimbursement, right?
This is a challenge that we all face in public service.
Well, at the risk of maybe problem solving here, take your point, and I think we can all relate that if you've got a computer, then you don't want to buy a second computer for the purpose of your city business. On the other hand, a Zoom account paid monthly would presume for city purposes would presumably fit within a reimbursement. So things that might be ongoing, I suppose there's a question. Well, a Zoom account would be one, a cell phone account, maybe less easily demonstrable as de minimis for personal use. So it may vary on a case by case. Would note Mountain View's policy does require itemized receipts, and that be used detailed receipts in order to document the reimbursement claims.
So if it is a technology account, I guess if it is a technology account that we're looking for reimbursement, perhaps we could come up with a list of what are some of those items that we use a lot, and for staff to vet what pros and cons or what issues might arise from that or not, whether it's acceptable. um, like, for example, I use a lot of ink printing stuff at home, so, but I don't know
So-
how to be personal and how do I count the ink being used for personal and so I just say, forget it, I mean, that's some of the issues that I run into.
So just conferring here with this focus, this is very helpful. We think there could be some stipends that are provided that where we're able to show what a reasonable proportion of like a service, like a cell phone account or a Zoom account. And then the de minimis issue involves a piece of hardware. So we can do some things, I think, around stipend that might be very simple to administer that will just defray some of those city-related costs.
Will you provide a list of what stipends can use towards in the,
Yes, we can work on that. If that's the council's, the committee's focus, we can work up a policy that would be as generous as possible for the types of things that you're wanting to do.
so can we come back to committee and let staff know if that's where you want to go with this?
I guess I'm seeing examples in both Mountain View and Sunnyvale of specifics around what Mountain View calls communication tools, including fax lines, tells you how old that is, and what Sunnyvale calls its technology allowance. And so there are great examples in there: telephones, fax lines, cell phones, data plans, computers, internet access, printer, laptop, mobile electronic device, tablet. So maybe we could get a list of including but not limited to, or along the likes of some kind of guidance there, and then this clarity about the de minimis.
Yes,
Yeah.
you'll see in there, they also, in maybe not in exactly the paragraph you're looking at, they do include that language about using it for city purposes except de minimis private use, and that is in state law. But I think the stipend approach could be very helpful in the modern context. So we'll work on that. We can come back. I think it could be a relatively short item since we have something really to focus on that we understand now.
So do you have any, or is it based, if you have any further comments so that staff can work on?
Yeah, I think a stipend makes sense because I think, $2,000 is a relatively low amount, especially compared to other cities. And the amount, the administrative overhead of processing it will be way more than $2,000. So we don't want that to be the case. So I think a stipend makes sense. And I could tell you for the 7 years I've been on council, every year I spend way more than $2,000 serving the city. So, I don't think we'd be too worried that people are making too much money from this stipend.
So do you need a motion to move forward, or this is just instructional as to how to proceed and what we might need back?
Should we come back with a sample policy then that focuses on supporting you around your communications and technology?
Super.
Okay,
I'd rather this go to council because we talk about it's $2,000 and staff's time is worth something. I'd rather just go to council. They could vote it up or down. I mean, we could stay at this for a long, long time, but I feel like our time's more valuable.
I think one thing we could do though, Councilmember Tanaka, if we came back to the committee and the committee took a look at it and found that it met your needs and you were unanimous, then it would go on consent as an amendment, as opposed to taking up a valuable action item time.
I hear you in the frustration. And I think there is merit in us. We're developing a policy that's going to have a lot of nitty gritty to it. So I think it saves time in the long run for us to get it right, respond to the draft the staff comes up with, get it finalized and get on consent for council.
Okay. I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can vote yes or no this early. So if the consideration comes, if you think that I can go straight to council and vet it over there, it might be better because I can't say that I would vote yes right now. So I'm not really sure. I mean, it has to be very firm parameters where, you know, the penalties are included. So there, it has to be a really well vetted one where everything is included before I can vote on it and let it go to consent.
So our thought would be we could bring back to you something very specific such that, again, the committee will hopefully be able to recommend it unanimously and then enable consent approval. That'd be our goal.
Okay, thank you so much for your patience and for colleagues. Yeah. All right. So this concludes item number 2. Our last one is future meetings and agendas. Or we can chat.
I will follow up with the chairperson, and I think the other noteworthy part is the draft work plan that tentatively gives our items is still in discussion at the city council. So as we firm it up there, we'll keep updating this group here.
Okay, thank you so much. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and thank you.